Joe Mason, and we're in front of my house here where I live with my wife Christy and my 4 boys. We run a mixed sheep and cropping operation here. Myself and my brother run it in conjunction with my parents. The farm here consists of a couple of different farms that have joined together over time, which is about 3,800 hectares. About 40% of the place is cropped every year. We join 9,000 merino ewes to boarders every year, roughly half of them to lamb in autumn and half in spring. The farm here, Spices Run, is located in central west New South Wales, about 30 kilometres north of Wellington. We get about 625 mils a rain a year.
With our cropping enterprise here at Spices Run, it normally consists of about a 10-year rotation between lucerne and cereal and legume crops. We'll typically have 5 to 6 years of lucerne, in which it's pretty intensively grazed throughout that period, and then we'll generally rip the country back up, bring it into a cropping cycle, and it'll consist of a rotation between cereals, which might be barley, oats and wheat, all wheat, and then some canolas and sometimes some specialised grazing options like some brassicas, forage oats, those type of crops. So coming out of the last couple of years of drought, we had some pretty severely depleted pasture stands. So we made the decision pretty early on to be pretty aggressive in our approach to get some of these paddocks back in the cycle and cropping again.
It's a really good season this year, so the wheat should be right on the upper end of its potential yields. I'm expecting somewhere around that 5.5–6 tonnes a hectare yields from our wheats. The canola, we've just started windrowing here. That's the stage it's at, and it's looking the same thing, sort of up near the top of what we can get out of a canola crop here, which is around that 3 tonnes a hectare. It's going to be 2 decent crops in a row after 2 very meagre crops here in 18 and 19. We run approximately 9,000 castrate merinos here that we buy as 5-year-olds from the same group of producers each year. Half of them are joined in spring to lamb in autumn. The other half are joined in autumn to lamb in spring. There's a couple of reasons why we have the 2 different lambings. A couple of things that work really well for us here. One, for starters, is it spreads the cash flow out throughout the year. Another thing is you get double use out of your rams. So we normally have about 90 to 95 or less of rams on the place to join all those ewes each year. My primary focus is on producing the best first cross ewe that I can, or that we can. All the male progeny get sold as meat, but the females have to be a really good first cross ewe article. So we've always tried to breed them from class breeders. So by the time I get them as a 5-year-old, or the time we get them as a 5-year-old, they're very productive sheep. So that's why we went down the class sheep approach. Yeah, so it's a lot of sourcing, but you end up with a really good breeding article in that first cross you produce to hopefully go and do a great job for someone else. The other challenge is that with all your sheep aren't in sync, so they're all going through different things at the same time. But I think there's more benefits than negatives about that. If you're doing a bit tough and there's some less quality feed, you can put the dry sheep there and keep your best stuff for the either heavily pregnant ewes or the ewes with lambs at foot, and maybe just some basic supplementary feeding for the dry sheep, or however it pans out. We've been scanning our ewes here for the best part of 20 years, and probably for nearly a decade we've been also identifying twins, and the main reason there was just around management and helping us get more of those conceived twins on the ground. We'll scan, we'll then split the twins off. We'll run them on better quality feed, and they'll also be then split up into smaller mob sizes for lambing. We try and target around that 150 to 200 for the twins, whereas quite comfortable having 300 to 350 in a single bearing mob. Longer term, we were running at around 115% lambs weaned to joined for the autumn lambing, and around 125% for the spring lambing ewes. We've got them both up around 130% now with the use of regulin and a little bit of getting a little bit better with our management around licks and things like that they need up, and smaller mobs and all these little things. One of the features of having 2 drops of lambs a year is that you're not really tempted to hold on to your lambs too long, because the market's a little bit soft at the time when you need to sell these when they're ready to go. We tend just to push ahead and sell them, and not try and hope the market's going to go up over the next month or two. We've always got the next drop of lambs not far coming along around the corner, which will take advantage of a better market down the track if there happens to be one. Stops you, just takes that temptation away, and you don't get backed into a corner, which can happen when you've got 1 drop of lambs a year and you really need to nail the market. With 2 drops of lambs, the weather's going at a different time of the ewes. They're pretty well spread throughout the year, and the prices tend to even out. You can just sell the lambs when it's the right time for the lamb and the farm, and not have to worry too much about the market price at the time. Traditionally, when we scan, we get for the spring lambing. Traditionally, they'd come through. We get about 5% dries, 2/3 with twins on board, 1/3 with a single on board. And the autumn would be the reverse. It'd be about 2/3 singles, 1/3 twins, 5% dries. With the use of regulin, we're getting those rates pretty similar for both lambings now, about 2/3 twins conceived. We're still not converting all those twins. We'll have a mob of, say, just for easy maths, 100 twin-bearing ewes, and we're getting about 175 lambs out of those 100. So there's still some slippage there, which I'd like to address, and we've definitely improved that number. We've probably gone from 160 from that 100, or 160% up to 175, but there's obviously still a few lambs that we aren't getting through to weaning there. So something we need to keep working on. One of the challenges we've got. We've got our wool shed based in the middle of the property. Our main shearing is in January. We basically shear for the month of January, and everything on the place gets shorn at that time. So all the merino ewes which have been here for already 12 months have obviously got 12 months worth of wool. There's quite a few we've bought throughout the year which have got usually about 7-8 months of wool. Just so happens to be that that's the sort of shearing they've come from. And we have various little lamb shearings throughout the year around what's best for flies / marketing the sheep and just general animal health management. It's early November here at the moment, and we're actually shearing some January shorn ewes here, which we often do a bit early because we've just weaned lambs off them and they're due to be sold on age. So we're shearing them now so that we can get rid of them in the next couple of weeks as mutton. We've had 2 very almost perfect seasons since. I'm just now hoping we get a dry window for harvest. Approximately 60% of the place is sown down to improve pasture, which is usually a mix of lucerne, clover, phalaris, chicory. So that's running all year long, with different plants a little bit more active at different times of the year in that mix. A big part of our sheep operation here at Spices Run is our improved mixed pastures. This is a good example of one of our, this is a pretty good quality paddock of new pasture we sowed last year. It's got, lucerne's probably still our predominant plant in our pasture mix, which is some of these plants. We've got chicory, phalaris there. There's sheep grazing here at the moment, so some of these are trimmed off a bit and some aren't. And there's also clover in there. So this is like what I'd call a really good mix for young growing sheep. And also putting some nitrogen back into the soil for our cropping phase at the same time. The other thing that fills a big gap in our grazing management is the dual purpose crops. They're sown sort of ideally early March, depending on getting a break to sow them. Graze through May, June, July, and they're a huge help to providing a lot of high nutrition feed to sheep through those months where traditionally it's a little bit slower growing as it's getting cooler. We lock the crops up at the right time to sort of maximise the grain yield. Most of the time we won't sacrifice those crops too much for the sheep. Here for us, oats, barley and canola we'd be taking the sheep off at the end of June. It's more on where it's up to reproductively. So they're not eating heads that are coming up the stem of the plant, that type of thing. Not eating bulbs of canola and things like that. Wheat, we take them off at the end of July, just as a bit of a blanket rule. Every season's a little bit different. Some years you've got a lot of feed, so you can sort of possibly take them off a bit earlier. Some years you don't have much and you've got them on there right till the last day you think you can do it without knocking the crops around. We'll then run sheep on the stubbles over summer too. Not a lot of nutrition in it generally, but we will get some grazing. We'll get some grazing out of it. It's probably more likely to be a dry ewe than a pregnant ewe or something like that, but we will graze those stubbles as well. As far as our pasture management goes with the sheep, I think there's some great tools out there now about how much feed you've got available in your paddock and all those sort of things, but to me it's still such a moving target that you just can't beat. You can't beat just getting around your place and having your eyes on stuff. We try and keep our pasture in that most productive phase, I suppose, for maximising the amount of growth you're getting and then also maximising the amount of nutrition you're getting into your animals. We'll cut hay if we've got surplus feed some years. We also harvest our own lucerne and phalaris seed when we get the opportunity. We utilise a lot of dual purpose cropping here, and with that we've got most of our paddocks based around about a 60-70 acre size, which is a bit annoying from a farming point of view. For a lot of people think that's too small, but it's a really effective size for dual purpose crops and trying to make the most out of the grazing of them. Much bigger than that, it's very hard to, we find, especially in a good season and especially if you're doing it with dual purpose canolas, really hard to graze them evenly and not have some paddock get away from you and go to waste. We crop around 40%, 60% of the place approximately through pastures. Now, of that cropping, quite a bit of thought has to go into the sheep program, the amount of feed reserves we've got on hand and all these sort of things. So the previous seasons can dictate a little bit the crop we're growing this year. For example, coming out of the drought, we grew more oats and barley than we normally would. We really only grow oats and barley here to replenish silos for drought reserve feed. We ran them right down during 17-18 or 18-19, and we then grew a lot of oats and barley in last year in 2020 to fill them back up. They're now full, we haven't used it, so coming into this cropping season we haven't grown a lot of oats and barley, just as an example of how the crop rotation moves around a bit. We've got a lot of sheep on hand at the moment, so we've put a couple of extra paddocks of brassica in this year. A really good fit as far as somewhere to put a percentage of your livestock when you're locking all those other dual purpose crops up for grain production. There's somewhere where you can really keep your sheep humming along. If you've got some lambs that are in close to being finished or sold, they can come out of a dual purpose crop, go into some of those brassicas. Well, we never lamb on the crops here. We're always lambing on the improved pasture paddocks. But we will mark lambs and wean lambs from those autumn lambers onto those dual purpose crops, and it's a fantastic place for them to really hit the ground running with that sort of high nutrition you can get out of them. Good infrastructure means the job is I'm sure if enjoyable is the right word, but less painful. So I think it's probably easy to keep employees long term. If you've got kids coming through the ranks on the farm, it's very easy to get them going if your yards are well built and well designed. Likewise with laneways, you know, your kids can take sheep away or get the sheep in for you while you're doing things in the yards. So those things, I think, it's the best money you ever spend on a farm is sheep infrastructure. I mean, it's long-term stuff, and it feels like you benefit from it almost every day. One of our good sheep management tools that we have here is we've got good sheep yards. We've got a set of auto-drafting weigh scales, some Pratley or ProWeigh ones, and we like to, not long after weaning, split all those lambs up into their weight brackets. We'll run the wethers and ewes separately in our operation because the ewes are getting sold later on as a first class ewe, but we do fairly quickly like to get them into their weight brackets. Not only do I think they do better, or I think it's proven they do better in their weight brackets, and certainly in the feedlots they've proven that, but in a paddock environment as well. It's also not a bad management tool later on as they're getting to market weights, those wether lambs, or as the first cross ewe buyers are coming. I can just go to one mob. I can just go straight to that heavy mob and get them from there. I'm not sorting from 4 or 5 mobs. I'll just go straight to the top mob or the middle mob or whichever weight bracket I'm targeting. So it's got some long-term benefits there as well. Yeah, another part of the operation here is we lease country on the southern side of town. We run a mixed farming operation there with a similar cropping and pasture program, but with a different sheep enterprise. Out there we run first cross ewes bred here, joined to a Dorset. It's a very similar operation as far as cropping and improved pastures go, but we do run a completely different sheep operation here. This is one step further down the chain from what we do at home. So there's Border Leicester Merino first cross ewes that we've bred at home, come out here, and then we join them to Dorset rams from Tattykeel. Standing in a crop of wedge-tail wheat here at the moment, and this was locked up at the end of July for grain production. However, months May, June, July, we actually weaned autumn drop lambs into here. So the Dorset rams were joined to the ewes in the middle of October. They lambed in March and April. They were then marked and came into here on their mums. They then did, with the good autumn we had, they did exceptionally well, and as we try and do most years here, they were sold off their mother as roughly 45 kilogram sucker trade lambs, some via the Forbes sale yards and some direct to Breakout River Meats in Cowra. It's another good sheep operation, but it's interesting for us to be involved with the ewes that we produce here down the road, so to speak, which is what our clients are going through. We try and get a really quick turn off of the second cross lamb there. We sell the vast majority of our autumn drop lambs there as suckers, either direct to processors to go into the supermarket trade or through Forbes sale yards. One thing that I think is really important, whether you're running a family farm or a corporate farm, is, I mean, you need to keep learning, and I think a chance to see someone else's operation, pick someone else's brain, or attend workshops, whether it be an MLA information day, a bred well, fed well session, a lifetime ewe management course, which I've done and now involved with a bit of a spin-off with a Better Livestock group. I mean, you definitely get something from the organisations. You get probably almost as much sometimes from the other producers in the room. You've got to make the time to do it. Everyone's extremely busy and everyone goes, I'd love to go, but I don't have the time. But I think those things, if you can, it's really beneficial to make the time, because it can be half a day that can help you out for the next decade. We've sort of got our eye on a couple of expansion opportunities coming up in the next couple of years, where we'll be, essentially doing a bit more of the same. Just the same thing on a little bit bigger scale. So that'll need some more staff resources and stretch everyone out a little bit more. But I think I'm hoping there'll be some good opportunities there the next couple of years, especially if we keep on the right side of the seasons a little bit, and prices for most of the commodities we produce here are really good at the moment. And hopefully, the outlook looks good. I'm hoping that sort of stays the case, and we can keep kind of growing our operation and get a little bit bigger. And then there is opportunities for that next generation coming through if they end up being interested.